Hare Krishna, Vanchakalpatrubhyascha, Kripasindubhyevacha, Patitanam Bhavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So welcome to our study of Srimad Bhagavatam. We're starting over again, having gone through the 11th and 12th cantos, and now we're back on Canto 1, Chapter 1, Verse 1. Well, now the little preliminary stuff. But before we begin, we'll say like this: Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Actually, you'll see that Prabhupada actually comments on that part in the very beginning of this. But first, here in the original Bhagavatam that Prabhupada translated in India and brought over, this is a facsimile. Now, I have some of the originals, but somebody did make a facsimile of the League of Devotees edition of this. And we already read the preface. And there's something in here that you won't see, that's somehow not carried over into the new Bhagavatam that was published in America, and there's what Prabhupada calls the motto. Just occupies one simple page. You see the little print, the motto, and it says, "It is admitted, even in higher circles, that in fact the whole root and background of Indian culture is wrapped in the Sanskrit language. And we know that the foreign invaders of India could break down some of the monumental architectural work to India, the work in India, but they were unable to break up the perfect ideals of human civilization, so far kept hidden within the Sanskrit language of Vedic wisdom." Srimad Bhagavatam, and again it's interesting that that's in boldface and it's spelled Bhagwatam, so all that's been, normalized. Srimad Bhagavatam is the mature, ripened fruit of the Vedic tree, of the tree of Vedic literature, and then in parentheses, pp. 66. Pages 66. It should be just one P, but actually PP means more than one page. We have just begun to give it rendered into English with broader outlook, and it is the duty of the leading Indias to spread the culture all over the world at this momentous hour of need. So this was Prabhupada's original appeal to Indians, especially those that knew English, they say English-knowing Indians in that time. So, and in this book, by the way, you see in the beginning, there's Prabhupada did not have in the original, because he published these chapters in his magazine, and he left out the Sanskrit, in the Devanagari Sanskrit, and just had a transliteration. And then at the beginning, you see, there it says, Srimad Bhagavatam, original Sanskrit text of the first chapter. And this footnotes, a star, asterisk, by the request of some scholars and librarians, the original shlokas are also inserted. The suggestions by the scholars were received late after printing of the first chapter, and thus they are inserted here with page marks where they are explained. So here you have you can see here, you can see if you can see this, and then the rest of the chapters, they have the Devanagari Sanskrit. This is the original cover here. So, and this is what I'm especially fond of this because when I first read Bhagavatam, the first thing was available were the BBT printing the second canto in little one little volumes of each chapter, a separate volume, a little paperback. And that's how I read it. And I didn't get to read the first canto until I moved into the temple, and they had these original ones there. And I saved the original ones we had, and so I read the original, and that's where Prabhupada's voice comes through quite clearly, even though it isn't. It's what the British called Babu English. It's the kind of English that Indians would speak to each other, who knew English, as they said, English knowing Indians. It's a kind of interesting language. So then Prabhupada's introduction to this. Now, most of the introduction, he's just telling the story of Lord Chaitanya. And I won't read that part, but the introduction begins with something I think is really important to understand. He says in the introduction, the conception of God and the conception of the absolute truth are not on the same level. Srimad Bhagavatam hits on the target of the absolute truth. And absolute truth is capitalized, by the way, the capital A, capital T. And he does that throughout. It's all been, normalized. Conception of God means the controller, whereas the conception of absolute truth means the summum bonum. That's in bold-faced. Of course, that's the Latin highest good, the summum bonum, or ultimate source of all energies. Now, well, let me just read it. No, that first sentence is really important in a way, because the idea of God and the idea of the absolute truth. Because he says, there is no two opinions about the personal feature of God because he is the controller. A controller cannot be impersonal feature. Modernized government, especially democratic government, is impersonal to some extent. But at the ultimate issue, the chief executive head is a person, and the impersonal feature of government becomes subordinate to such a personal feature of the government. So whenever we speak of something of control over others, we must bring in the personal feature without any doubt. There may be many gods because there are different controllers in the different parts of management. According to the statement of the Bhagavad Gita, any controller who has got some special power, extraordinary than others, this two words, extraordinary than others, is called a Vibhutimat Sattva, or controller empowered by the Lord. There are many Vibhutimat Sattvas, controllers or gods with different specific powers, but the absolute truth is one without a second, and the Srimad Bhagavatam designates the absolute truth, or the summum bonum, as the Param Satyam. So this is the interesting, there can be many, but in principle there can be many gods. And you can have one supreme God, but the absolute in principle is there's only one thing. Because absolute means not related to anything else, one without a second. That besides which there is no second thing. And so that means if there's a God and there's a world, then there's two things. So that's why the Mayavadis, when they deal with the absolute truth, say oh, there's no world. It doesn't exist. There's only one thing, and it's just an illusory superimposition. But here the absolute truth means Krishna includes his energies. So there's God in the world, but ultimately God and his energies are one thing. And Prabhupada in the Bhagavad Gita commentary says things like this: nothing is different from Krishna, yet Krishna is different from everything. Now, I memorized that early on, and I just repeated it to myself over and over again. Nothing is different from Krishna, yet Krishna is different from everything. Or in another place, Prabhupada says, there's nothing but Sri Krishna, yet nothing is Sri Krishna save and except his original personality, spiritual personality. So God both transcends the world and he includes it. That's the idea. So you think of God in the world as different or not including or separate from the world. That's not quite true. So this is why it's important to understand this idea of the absolute truth. And so the first beginning of the Vedanta Sutra, Atato Brahma Jignasa. Now there should be inquiry into Brahman. Brahman is Janmadasyataha, that from which everything comes. That's the definition of Brahman. And then Shankaracharya very much says, actually nothing comes from Brahman because he has no energies. That's the illusion. Brahman is one without a second. So yeah, there's only one. So that's a Prabhupada calls it somewhere a lax idea of the absolute truth, not quite understanding it. One without a second. Yeah, that's true. That's true, but also includes the many. The one that includes the many doesn't exclude it. So the whole absolute is Krishna and Krishna's energies. And so anyway, so Prabhupada makes that point from the very beginning of this introduction that he's of the idea of the absolute truth and the conception of God and conception of the absolute truth. So he says here in this Srimad Bhagavatam, i.e., the author of the book at first offers his respectful obeisances under the Param Satyam. Param Satyam means the highest good, you could say, or the highest truth. And because the Param Satyam is the ultimate source of all energies, the Param Satyam is the supreme person. The gods, or the controllers, are undoubtedly persons, but the Param Satyam, from whom the gods and so on, etc., derive powers of control, is also a person and is the supreme person. The Sanskrit word Ishvara conveys the import of God. Ishvara means controller. The Sanskrit word Ishvara conveys the import of God, but the supreme person is called the Paramishvara, or the supreme Ishvara. The supreme person, or Parameshwara, is the supreme conscious personality, and because he does not derive any power from any other source, therefore he is the supremely independent. In the Vedic literature, Brahma is described as the supreme god, or the head of all other gods like Indra, Chandra, Varuna, etc. But the Srimad Bhagavatam affirms that even Brahma is not independent in the matter of his power and knowledge. He received knowledge or the Vedas from the Supreme Person who resides within the heart. And he has a footnote citing Bhagavad Gita 15:15. of every living being. That Supreme Personality knows everything directly and indirectly. Individual, infinitesimal persons who are parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality may know directly and indirectly everything about their personal body or external features, but the Supreme Personality knows everything perfectly well, both about his external and internal features. He goes on, the words Janma Dasya suggest the source of all production, maintenance, and destruction is the same Supreme Conscious Person. Even in our present experience, we can know nothing, even in our present experience, we can know that nothing is generated from inert matter. But inert matter can be generated from living entity. By contact of the living entity, the material body develops into a working machine. Man with poor fund of knowledge mistakes the bodily machinery as the living being, but the fact is that the living being, as he is the basis of the bodily machine. The bodily machine is useless as soon as the living spark is away from it. As such, the original source of all material energy is the Supreme Person. This fact is expressed in all the Vedic literatures, and all exponents of spiritual science have accepted this truth. The living force is called, in other words, as Brahman, and one of the greatest acharyas, namely Sripad Shankaracharya, has preached that Brahman is substance, while the cosmic world is category. The original source of all energies being the living force, this has with a capital L for living, and he is logically accepted as the Supreme Person. Therefore, he is fully conscious of everything past, present, and future, and also each and every corner of his creative manifestation, both material and spiritual. An imperfect living being does not know even what is happening within the physiological condition of his personal body. He eats his foodstuff but does not know perfectly as to how the foodstuff transforms into vitamins, specifically for a particular constitution of his own body. Now, if you think of this, say, I want to lift my hand, I lift my hand, and you ask me, how did you do that? And I have not got the faintest idea. I just know I can do it. Far out, huh? How did that happen? Who runs the body? It's not me. I don't know how. Pretty interesting. Perfection of a living being means awareness of everything that happens, and the Supreme Person being all perfect is quite natural for him that he knows everything in all details. As such, the perfect personality is addressed in the Srimad Bhagavatam as Vasudeva, or one who lives everywhere in full consciousness and in full capacity of his complete energy. The whole thing is clearly explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and the reader will have ample opportunity to study them in all critical ways. In the modern age, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu preached the cult of Srimad Bhagavatam by practical demonstration. It is easier, therefore, to penetrate into the topics of the Srimad Bhagavatam through the medium of Sri Chaitanya's causeless mercy. We need some help. His merciful short sketch life and precepts are also inserted herewith for specific understanding of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So that therefore you have a whole survey in this introduction, the story of Lord Chaitanya. This will help the reader perfectly to understand the real merit of Srimad Bhagavatam. Then he goes on, it is imperative that one should learn Srimad Bhagavatam from the person Bhagavatam. So it's interesting, when this book arrived on our shores, it was accompanied by Srila Prabhupada. The two came together. The person Bhagavatam is one whose very life is practical Srimad Bhagavatam. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, being the absolute personality of Godhead, he is both Bhagwan and Bhagavatam, in person and in sound. And his process of approach of the Srimad Bhagavatam is therefore practical for all people of the world. He wanted it and ordered his followers that the cult of Srimad Bhagavatam shall be preached in every nook and corner of the world by everyone who happens to take his birth in India. Srimad Bhagavatam is the science of Krishna, the absolute personality of Godhead, and as much we have preliminary information from the text of the Bhagavad Gita. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that everyone, it does not matter what he is, who is well versed in the science of Krishna, Srimad Bhagavatam, and for that matter of that Srimad Bhagavad Gita, can become an authorized preacher or preceptor in the science of Krishna. There is need of the science of Krishna in the human society for the suffering humanity of the world, and we would simply request the leading personalities of all nations to take some information of the science of Krishna for their own good, for the good of the society, and for the good of all people in the world. And then he says, and it's in parentheses here, in italics, a short life sketch and teachings of Lord Chaitanya, the preacher of Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is like very far out, you know. And here Prabhupada uses this word science because it gives knowledge. Bhagavad Gita says pratyaksha, direct perception of the absolute truth. But that's why we have to see that the process we undergo of chanting Hare Krishna, and by that chanting, what happens is that you will see, you easily identify the modes of nature. What is the mode of passion? What is the mode of goodness? What is the mode of ignorance? And by chanting Hare Krishna, you should see these things, the mode of passion, the mode of ignorance, go down. And the mode of goodness becomes prevalent. And then there can start to begin actual knowledge. So it's a science. It's in the sense that you have to, first of all, you have to make yourself you can't just do funny things to animals in cages, you know. This science, you have to do it to yourself, and you have to purify the mind, and by that, as the mind becomes purified by hearing, chanting, and processes of bhakti yoga, you can get pratyaksha avagamam. This word is in Bhagavad Gita. Pratyaksha means right in front of your eyes. Direct perception, not only of oneself as a spiritual being, but of the Supreme Spirit. All these things become knowable. If you don't follow this procedure, you won't know. If you go into a chem lab and want to do some chemistry experiment to get a result, you have to follow the procedure. If your test tubes are dirty, if you use the wrong amounts of stuff, it doesn't work. you know. You have to follow the procedure. So this is why Prabhupada calls this a science of self-realization. And people have objected to that because it's a science where you have to do it on yourself, and they don't want to. Our science is in the service of the mode of passion mostly. Our standard of it, Prabhupada points out, the standard of advancement of modern civilization is the standard of the mode of passion. More money, more prestige, more fame. This is all the mode of passion. The result of mode of passion, we also learn from the same text, is misery. Because the mode of passion increases your desires and what you want to do without limit, and you keep running into barriers. You have to stop somewhere. And then you become frustrated because you can't get what you want. And therefore, one of the results of this frustration is mode of ignorance, which means either intoxication, blotting things out, opioid addictions, for example, or insanity, where you don't see reality anymore, so you can have this inflated idea of who you are that you then try to convince everybody else is true. We also see megalomania of various sorts. So this is the science of the mode of goodness, and it's needed. And it says that in the mode of goodness you can see things in the right position, hear things in the right position, do things, and so on. And we have no cultivation of the mode of goodness anymore. It's all mode of passion. So this is Prabhupada's, what he brings to us. So that's the introduction to this Bhagavatam, this science of self-realization. Now, we go to the texts themselves, and then Prabhupada also puts in this, a translation of the Shishastaka prayers of Lord Chaitanya at the end of that. And that's the one that, like, we recited in the temple. You lived in the temples, you recited every morning, and you memorized that translation of the Shishastaka. And it wasn't until fairly late I realized that when Prabhupada's translation of the Chaitanya Charitamrita came out, the whole last chapter of the Chaitanya Charitamrita is Lord Chaitanya with his most intimate associates reciting the Shishastaka prayers. And Prabhupada translated them differently then. There's a different translation. And also, he comments on them. And that was a big revelation for me, because I had just gone on, without... it just didn't dawn on me the first time I read the Chaitanya. This is a different translation. And most people kind of skip it, go, oh, I already know this part. But actually, it's really, really important, the translation and the Prabhupada's... what Lord Chaitanya says about it and Prabhupada's commentary on it. So that's there, by the way, from the idea. And if I had my way, we would insert in the beginning of the Bhagavatam the whole chapter practically of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So anyway, the first one is the questions. The first chapter is called Questions by the Sages at Naimisharanya Forest. And the first three texts, the introductory texts, are the prelude to Srimad Bhagavatam. The story doesn't really begin until text 4. So this is the prelude. And the first text, again, it starts with Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We say that when we have Bhagavatam classes all the time, responsibly. And Prabhupada's commentary begins with this commentary on this word Vasudeva. But let me read the whole text. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadyasya Yaton Vayat Itaratas Charate Shabikya Swarat Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kavaye Bhuyanti Yatsuraya Tejo Vari Mridam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargam Risha Dhamna Swena Sada Narasta Kuhakam Satyam Bharam Dhimahi. That's how it goes in Sanskrit. And the translation here: O my Lord, Sri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Sri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primeval cause of all causes, of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge into the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed in illusion, as one is bewildered by the illusory representation of water seen in fire or land seen on water. Only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature, appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Sri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. One thing that you can see right away, if you want to really see the material world the way it really is, you have to see it through the eyes of Krishna. Because it looks like it's independent. But Ishavasham midam sarvam, this whole world is pervaded and maintained by Ishavash. You have to see it in context. So the first statement here, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Now this Vasudeva with the long A, the son of Vasudeva, is a patronymic. Patronymic is like Johnson, the son of John. That name Johnson originally meant John's son. That's a patronymic. And so in English, or the MacDonald, the son of Donald, that's also another patronymic. And in Russian they have them, and so this is, and there's matronymics too, by the way. So this is his. When Vasudeva with its long A is the son of Vasudeva, Krishna's father. When he appeared on earth was named Vasudeva, so he's Vasudeva, the all-pervading personality of Godhead, Bhagavata, and Janma Adi, Janma, etc. Etc. means birth, maintenance and destruction. That all three of those are understood. So it's that from which janmadasyataha. And you see, that is the definition of absolute. In the Vedanta Sutra, begins like this. And remember, a sutra is a condensed. So knowledge was contained in sutra form. It was condensed. Like even the grammar is a sutra. The way, like if you were a student in the olden days, they would take a little 5-year-old, mostly boys, I think, but when they're like 4 or 5 years old, and they'd start them in school, and what they would do, the Sanskrit grammar was in sutra form. And they would simply chant the sutras, because at the age of 4 or 5, you can memorize everything and understand nothing. And so they take advantage of that capacity to remember that little children have, and as you get older, you forget more. but so they would just chant these. It says you walk by a Brahminical village and you can hear the children chanting in their huts. It sounds like the croaking of frogs. It's an auspicious sound, you know, that sound of the. So you walk through the village, you could hear in the various places, you know, the boys are chanting these sutras. And they just remember them, and then they teach them how to unpack them. So they have the whole grammar in their head. You know, so sutras need unpacking, and therefore there's commentaries on the sutras. But it says that, there's a Sanskrit saying that a grammarian rejoices at the saving of one syllable as he would at the birth of a son. That's like very auspicious to get rid of, you know, make them as condensed as possible. That's how it was done in that time. Because we think of writing as progress, but they think that writing is no good. We have it now, it's a crutch, because we've lost the power to remember. And that's why Vyasa wrote things down, because Kali Yuga is beginning and people will lose the power of memory. Because our big modern myth is the myth of progress. Oh, look, and we celebrate the invention of writing. But the same complaint about writing you can find in Plato. But Socrates says this is not good. Because he also came from a time where they remembered these things, you know, that you didn't know things. And there were also, people would do that. There were mnemonic systems for people, because also even when you had books, they were rare, you know, because you had to write them and copy them by hand and stuff. And so people had systems, what they were called memory palaces, where they would take a whole area of knowledge and think of it like in this room there's these things, and imagine the things on this vase is this, and this picture is this. So they would have all these mnemonic systems for memorizing things. And then when I was in graduate school, somebody said knowledge means knowing how to look it up. And now that we have these wonderful devices, these computers and everything, and Wikipedia and, you know, the internet, we know even less. If all our systems would fail, everybody would, what'll I do now? But they don't teach it anymore. So we're going back to somewhat of the old way. I mean, Prabhupada brought books, but he also wanted us to remember things and to memorize verses and to keep them in mind. And especially Bhagavad Gita is is easier to remember than Bhagavatam. So I'm just yeah, I wanted to give you an idea of this idea of how it worked in those days. So anyway, here we have the absolute truth, Janmadyasya Yataha. Oh yeah, that is the beginning of the Vedanta Sutra. Atato Brahma Jignasa. Now is the time, the inquiry into Brahman. So it's just like Ata, therefore, Atato, now, therefore, Brahma Dasya. Atato Brahma Jignasa. Jignasa is inquiry into Brahman. And then Janma Dasa Yataha. That defines Brahman, that from which everything comes. So Janma Yasayataha, you notice how it's got this quotation actually from the Vedanta Sutra, Janma Dasyataha. And so Janman Adi Asya, of the manifested from Yataha, from which comes, from whom comes, of this manifested universe, is just as of this, meaning the references of the universe, Janma Adi, the creation, that from which the universe comes, by whom it is maintained, and into whom it goes back in the end. Right? So that's this Janma Dasayataha. And it refers to, and Prabhupada will comment on this, refers to Brahman. And he says here in the purport, obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, directly indicate Lord Sri Krishna, who is the divine son of Vasudeva and Devaki. So that's the patronymic. This fact will be more explicitly explained later in the text of this work, when Sri Vyasadeva directly asserts that Sri Krishna is the original personality of Godhead and all others are his direct or indirect plenary portions or portions of the portions. That's a reference to the third canto, third chapter of the first canto, 1-328. And this verse it referred to goes, Ete chamsa kala pumsam Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam Indrari Vyakulam Lokam Mridayanti Yuge Yuge. So this verse comes where there has been, and this chapter is called Krishna is the source of all incarnations. So there's been a discussion of the different devas and so on, and avatars of the Lord, and that says all these are amshas or kalas. Amsha means a part, and a kala means a very small part. So Prabhupada calls them plenary portions or portions of the plenary portions. All of these are parts, but he uses the word plenary because they have power. Plenary means with full power. When you have a plenary session, that's when you see the word of some committee. It means that it's an empowered committee. But Krishna himself, who occurs as an avatar, but he himself is Bhagavan Swayam. So Krishna is distinguished from all the different avatars who come. Krishna also is avatar. The word avatar means one who comes down, etymologically, a descendant. All these, when Krishna appears among them, But he himself is not just one among them. He is Bhagavan Swayam. And all of these come down. What they do when they come down, there is the enemies of Indra, known as the demons. Again, this is a refer to the fact that the Bhagavatam describes a kind of long-lasting cosmic interplanetary warfare between the devas and the asuras, the gods and the demons. They fight each other. There's going on. If you like science fiction, here it is. This implanted cosmic story of good against evil, you know. And because the demons are very powerful and cunning, and the devotees are nice guys, they tend to lose out, and so Krishna comes down periodically to help them out. Either comes himself or sends somebody to to tilt the balance. So he gives protection, Vidayanti Yuge Yuge, Yuga after Yuga. All of the above-mentioned incarnations are either plenary portions or portions of the plenary portions of the Lord, but Lord Sri Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. All of them appear on planets whenever there is disturbance created by the atheists. The Lord incarnates to protect the devotees. And we'll discuss, this is, according to Jiva Goswami, of the Bhagavatam, what's called the Paribhasha Sutra. That text of which all of the texts are explained by. It's a special text, and it has the indications. It's not just arbitrarily said this way, but it's the Paribhasha Sutra. And we'll take up a little bit about that also next class. All right, we'll stop here. We got a little bit into it. So now, questions or comments?
If you are on Facebook and you have a question, go ahead and type it into the comment section underneath this video. If you are on the phone, press *6 and that will unmute yourself. And everybody's also welcome to use the Ravindra Svarupa's website, rsdasa.com. There's a chat box there. And if you're in the live studio audience, just let me know. You can generate questions here. Here's a question from Ratnabhushana Bhushana. He says, Hare Krishna Gurudev, kindly accept my humble obeisance. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. First off, my sincere compliments on your successful completion of the 11th and 12th cantos of Bhagavatam and the commencement of the first. Looking much forward to the upcoming classes. As for my question, it relates to the Shikshastika prayers, more specifically to verse 4 and 5. In verse 4, we read how Lord Chaitanya rejects all worldly aspiration, including the desire for liberation. In the subsequent verse, we then read how Mahaprabhu speaks of having fallen into the stormy ocean of material existence and praying to be situated as a particle of dust at Krishna's lotus feet. You have mentioned that there is a progressive sequence among the 8 verses of the Shikshastika. Mm-hmm. With that in mind, could you comment on how we are to understand Lord Chaitanya's prayer to be lifted out of the rough ocean of material existence when he has already denounced the very desire for liberation in the previous verse? Thank you very much.
It's an expression of, as a devotee, of this sense of hopelessness and of being able to unsave yourself, but to be saved by Krishna. Ainanda chanuja kinkaram patitam mam vishameva kripaya tava parapankaja. You please lift me up. I cannot lift myself up. You please lift me up from him. So here he, completely addresses the son of. It says Nanda Tanuja, Anuja, born from Nanda. And that's a particularly intimate sort of, when Krishna is addressed with the name of his devotees, it's particularly appreciated by him. So he's Nanda Tanuja. Uh, uh, and and I've fallen. I'm hopeless. I'm helpless. As you go through the Shashastika prayers, you find that humility increases on and on and on. So it's telling how to be a devotee. And one thing we don't learn about is humility, where you're supposed to be proud of yourself, right? Teach people to be proud and all this other stuff. So, but we're on the path of humility, and Lord Chaitanya is tasting that path. He's seeing what it's like to be a devotee, and he thinks, God himself thinks it's better to be a devotee than to be God. He appreciates his devotees so much that he wants to take that role. And by so doing also show what it's like, how to do it, set the example. But he himself wants to. And this particularly, he's thinking of Srimati Radharani as his exemplary devotee, wants to understand her. And he thinks that she feels more bliss than he does. How can it be I'm the supreme enjoyer, and yet I see my devotees, because of what they feel about me, they feel more bliss than I do. I don't want to be left out. So he takes on that role and shows us how to do it. So now here's this beginning of the real expressions of this humility. And so that's why it's actually, and it progressive in this way.
Just a quick comment on that of how God wants to be a devotee, and that also points to why it's so important for us, or so helpful to our own Krishna consciousness, to serve other devotees, because that's actually what pleases Krishna the most, is serving his own devotees. Vijay Krishna Prabhu has a question. He says, related to the introduction, where I find the ultimate source of all energies, Krishna doesn't force me to love him, and if I choose to not love him, the only alternative for me, being an eternal living entity, is to inhabit the material world where complete forgetfulness of Krishna is possible. My question is, what about forcing me to exist? I am his part and parcel, and because of being his part and parcel, I have no alternative other than to accept existence by force of the circumstance, which is being part and parcel of an eternal being. If I choose not to exist, is it that the possibility of non-existence is available? I do not remember asking God to become his part and parcel. Does Krishna have the right to make me his part and parcel without previous consultation?
Because you're eternal. You're when there's Krishna, and then there's Krishna's energies, and one of those energies are the jivas. And he can give you oblivion for his, you won't know you're a part and parcel, because you'll be like some, little squiggle of life somewhere and crawling across an ocean bottom or something, You don't know. So you are eternal. And if you don't want to be, you can be some living being with the dimmest amount of consciousness. You're like a deep dreamless sleep for on and on and on and on and on and on and on. Now, a sleeping person has no self-awareness, but if you're in deep dreamless sleep, but you're there, barely. So that he can give you all that for a very, very long time. but you're eternal. Suicide, total suicide, is not possible. I mean, when you want to enter into Brahman or enter into the void like the Buddhists, that's a kind of spiritual suicide. Prabhupada refers it to that. That's what they're looking for. But you don't. I mean, the word nirvana means extinguish. You get extinguished. But we understand it's extinction of material existence.
Vijay Krishna Prabhu also asks, related to the first verse where I find the synonym Namaha, offering my obeisances, Lord Chaitanya's movement, in my humble understanding, has nothing to do with offering obeisances, because it leads us to a spiritual situation where, like you usually say, we can experience the private life of God, where we find his associates dealing with him with all kinds of irreverence. My question is, being a follower of Lord Chaitanya's movement, is there any need for me to offer obeisances? To whom?
If you want to be part of Lord Chaitanya's movement, you offer obeisances all over the place. In Lord Chaitanya's Leela, Shivananda Sain offered obeisances to his dog because the dog he was attached to the dog, and anyway, when the dog disappeared, and he was really upset, and attachment to dogs, of course, is becoming more and more prominent in our place. So Shivananda Sain had a dog, and then he. When he finally arrived, he was on the way. He lost it on the way to Jagannath Puri to see Lord Chaitanya. And when he arrived, he saw that the dog was there with Lord Chaitanya, and Lord Chaitanya was throwing at him some pieces of coconut pulp that the dog was eating as prasadam. And so when he saw that the dog was eating prasadam from the hand of Lord Chaitanya, he offered his obeisances to the dog. And then they didn't see the dog again because the dog had attained his spiritual existence because of eating Lord Chaitanya's remnants directly. But he offered obeisances to his dog. So go ahead, if you have a dog like that, you can do it. So again, this is the path of humility, and even Lord Chaitanya himself, because, if you want to be a devotee, as humility increases, love for Krishna increases. People have criticized, like Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher, criticized devotee, the slave mentality, this humility. And people are always telling you to be proud of who you are, proud of this, proud of that. But and then so people think there's some kind of psychosis or something involved, that people are seeking out humility. But the reason people seek out humility who are devotees, it is because love of God increases. And actually, when you see somebody who's actually humble, it's quite attractive. And because you may see these people who are very humble, but you think they're great people, they've done all these great things, but they think, well, I didn't do it, somebody empowered me, or somebody made it possible, or they thank other people more. They feel gratitude to other people that helped them, even if it's something mundane. And that's very attractive, to see somebody. And the opposite, somebody's absolutely scum, but they're very proud. It's not so attractive, the opposite way. So we have some instinct that it's actually a very good quality.
I also like what you often say, that humility is just realism.
Yeah. Uh-huh. But it's different from low self-esteem. You know, low self-esteem is you feel humble and you can't stand it because you want to be big. So, low self-esteem is thwarted pride, and so you're angry about it, or angry at somebody, or angry at yourself, or whatever.
Pradana Gopika asks, she says, Hare Krishna, dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. You mentioned that by chanting Hare Krishna, Raja and Tamaguna decrease. Why does Krishna speak in Bhagavad Gita 14.1 about the gunas as supreme wisdom and the best of all knowledge? Is it because of without developing sattva guna, it's impossible to surrender to Krishna?
Yeah, I think that's one good reason. First of all, let you know about the cosmos anyway, but also in ourselves we have to be able to see these modes, see how they work, understand how they're working, and learn how to deal with them. And you can understand a lot about other people too. about the modes of, what is their standard of advancement? The standard of advancement of most people, as I said, is the standard of the mode of passion. And so it just lets you understand a lot about the human world around you. We should do those things that help increase the mode of. And how can you become free from the modes? Well, you know, just by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, while trying to become free from offenses, that's called namabhasa. It's not, the pure name is not visible, but the kind of reflection of the pure name by chanting on the clearing stage. And that gives liberation, even. And then the pure name gives love of God. So one can see that am I chanting while trying to give up offenses, and you should see that these modes of passion, which you can very easily identify. I've even made a big chart from various places describing the modes, so you can see them and understand them, because it's like clinical. The sense you can identify them, and you can understand what you need to do to become free from the modes. And remember that the result of the mode of goodness is happiness. The result of the mode of passion is misery, and the mode of ignorance is stupidity and oblivion. So this is what yes, it's quite, and we have a method that actually works. And you're dealing with your mind. I mean, the other thing is the mind. There's the prayer, you know, my mind, you're not a Vaishnava. When we have taken birth, our subtle body has come with us from the previous existence. In other words, we brought it with us. The soul, we were taken birth because we're still in a subtle body, and it's coming with us from the last subtle body, the last body we are in. And therefore, you know, you have personality from the very beginning, practically. You can tell immediately. If you have little children, you know, they're born with personalities, likes and dislikes, and that's all in the subtle body. But the thing is, we don't know what's in there. I mean, we even brought it along with us. God knows, all of a sudden, like weird things have come up, and things you want or don't want, or urges or aversions or attractions that are there. What are they? Where do they come from? You don't know what's in there. So the whole yoga system is really dealing with the subtle body, dealing with the mind, and to purify the mind is really hard. And most people don't even know how to deal with it. You have to have some discipline. You can't be completely filled with attention deficit disorder and so on. But there's very little to discourage, to actually, for the formation of a mind that's helpful. We can do that. And remember, whatever progress you make using the human form of life for spiritual advancement, even if you don't get all the way, your next life you don't begin at zero. So that sense is good. There's some carryover, and you can pick up where you left off.
I just had a question about asuras and this concept of anartas, and how now Krishna was on the planet and the demons were outside of us, and now they're within us. And I'm just wondering about the other asuras that Indra had problems with. Where do they exist in our world?
Asurya namate loke. They are planets of there are asuras. They're called lower planets. You have to remember that the devas have subtle bodies. They have bodies of mind, you might say. The devas are like that. The devas are kind of like the nervous system of the universe. But there's also the asuras who have similar kinds of existence, and the anti-gods, and so every so often they come up, they erupt and take over. There's a battle, and in the human form of life, you see some people who are under the influence of one or the other, the godly or the ungodly, that are like that. So this is our situation. We're in Middle Earth, battleground Earth, even. So to speak, the human life and the human planets is having to deal with them, so we can go up or we can go down. So, anyway, I don't know if that helps. No, not at all, huh?
Bhakti Impala asks, relating to sadhana and chanting Hare Krishna, I seem to remember Bhaktivinoda Thakur gave an order of priority with health first, then sadhana, then family, then seva. Is this correct? Sometimes it seems like a vicious circle as well, with the modes affecting our mental and physical health, making it more difficult to chant. Can you please comment?
Well, if you want anything material, that's okay to want is a healthy body. Health helps. So you can ask for that if you want to have help to help you so you can perform devotional service. It's perfectly all right to ask for that. you know, that's okay. And that's what he's I think he's talking about. And Prabhupada also wanted us to be healthy. Actually, the mode of goodness helps you be healthy, by the way. That's a side effect of the mode of goodness, is you tend to be healthy. I mean, you don't eat unhealthy things, you don't live in unhealthy places, you don't engage in unhealthy activities, you know. So a lot of disease, I mean, it's just normal part of aging, and things fall apart, but a lot of diseases are caused by unhealthy things. And then there's the other thing. Do you know this word, iatrogenetic diseases? Diseases caused by medical treatment. Iatros is the Greek word for physician. Iatrogenetic diseases caused by doctors. So be careful.
And one more, Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu, he says, Gurudev, please accept my obeisances. I recall a statement that I thought you made regarding asuras, but I can't find the recording. The demons, this is the quote that he thinks that you said, the demons want darkness, but they want it to shine. Does this sound like a statement that you made?
I don't remember making it. But anyway, it's okay. They do want it to shine. Okay? Anything else? All right, so we'll continue now with Srimad Bhagavatam 111. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.